Okay, well, good afternoon. We're here making this video for our members of Brexpats in Spain. I'm obviously Anne Hernandez, President of the association. I shall introduce you to the people we have here. But the purpose of this is because basically we are financially restricted. We've had lots and lots of questions from all over Spain, the Canaries and the Balearic Islands, which we obviously cannot get to. So we thought this would be a good idea to pick the most pertinent questions and together with our experts today try and resolve some of your concerns. So let me introduce to you first of all, we are proud to be accompanied by Juan Carlos Maldonado, who's the Mayor of Mijas, and sitting alongside him is Charmaine Arbuin, who is the British Consul for Andalusia and the Canary Islands. Next to her is Tim, and I've got to get this pronounced correctly, Jovet.
Close enough.
of Black Tower. Next to him is Vicky Westhead, our legal advisor. Next to her is Miriam Salvici, who is of Go for Spain. To my right, I am joined by Judy Falmer, who probably you've heard of on Facebook. She's one of the admins. And Craig Webb, also of Black Tower. So I think we shall pass the first word to the Mayor of Mijas, Juan Carlos Maldonado, and thank you very much for joining us.
Bueno, pues sobre todo gracias por la invitación. Un saludo a los miembros del consulado británico, a los cuales siempre están presentes en Mijas, porque Mijas en cierto modo es británica. Gracias también a la asociación Brexpats por esa confianza desde primera hora en el ayuntamiento de Mijas, y tiene su razón de ser. Son 11.000 británicos los que conviven con nosotros y por tanto de vital importancia que su administración más cercana, el ayuntamiento, pues sea consciente de su situación. Intentemos en la medida de lo posible despejar dudas, incertidumbres y sobre todo que contribuyamos a la estabilidad en cuanto a sus condiciones de vida y la calidad de vida, que esos son los elementos que realmente eligieron para vivir con nosotros, para ser mijeños y para prácticamente considerarse como en su propia casa, ¿no? Si quiere traduce poco a poco porque yo me enrollo y es más complicado.
Okay, I should just translate that for you. He says, in brief, he's very pleased to have been included in this video. He would like to show his support and to welcome everybody. It's obviously a very important thing that's facing us, and he fully understands our worries as British here, particularly in Mijas, but also in all of Spain. And he would just like to show his support. In Mijas alone, they have 11,000 British residents, so it's quite a big borough, and obviously he's concerned for all of them.
Bien, y como ya no solo lo hacemos porque son vecinos, que también es nuestra obligación, sino también porque nuestra economía, la economía del municipio depende del turismo residencial, donde los británicos pues tienen un peso específico muy importante. Y lo que queremos es actuar realmente con hechos, no con palabras. Ya creo que estamos cansados todos de palabras que al final lo que contribuye a generar más incertidumbre. Lo más importante es ponernos a trabajar, así lo hicimos, se constituyó con muy buen criterio esta asociación que viene en primer lugar a unificar, a hacer unión, a hacer fuerza por todos los residentes para que se escuche su voz de preocupación ante este fenómeno de cierto modo de desconexión de la Unión Europea con el Reino Unido o Reino Unido con la Unión Europea, pero que eso no se puede llegar a la práctica en su totalidad, porque los vínculos están ahí presentes, porque están viviendo con nosotros y porque es nuestra voluntad que sigan las relaciones tal cual están. Porque se abre también un abanico de incertidumbre en cuanto a cuestiones tan importantes como la propia sanidad, o cuanto, por ejemplo, el valor de la moneda, que influye también en el nivel de vida de los residentes aquí, por tanto, en nuestra economía. Lo que queremos es ponernos a disposición de los residentes británicos a través de la asociación como interlocutor válido, ponernos también con el consulado británico a trabajar, a poner puentes de unión y ponernos a disposición también vuestra para ser referentes o interlocutores con otras administraciones. Así lo estamos haciendo, así lo vamos a hacer y yo creo que es la mejor forma, trabajando para despejar dudas y generar confianza. Es más, agradezco al mercado británico su confianza en Mijas, que aún con el Brexit siguen confiando. Recientemente anunciamos 200 millones de euros de inversiones británicas aquí en la zona de la Cala y eso es muestra de que por encima de cuestiones o procesos concretos esa vinculación continúe y va a seguir existiendo, no me cabe ninguna duda.
Okay, to translate that, he says that obviously tourism is the main economy here on the Costa del Sol, and the British have a very important input in this that obviously Spain doesn't want to lose. He fully understands our uncertainty, and it's extremely important that we all work together. Hence, he's very supportive of Brexpats in Spain as an association, because he knows we're trying to unite everybody who is British, who is resident in Spain. He also fully understands that the links to the EU are of long standing. They can't just be cancelled out immediately, but he knows that there will be doubts concerning health. Obviously the pound has dropped, and these things will have some sort of negative impact on our lives that he fully is aware of, but wants to make them as less harmful as possible, let's put it like that. He would like to reiterate that he is at our full disposition. He thanks us enormously for our confidence in him. He hopes to be able to form bridges, to act perhaps as a link, not only with the British people, but with other Spanish authorities, Spanish associations, with all the other people that are here.
Y ya simplemente despedirme, seguir a disposición vuestra, seguir trabajando en esa línea, y thank you very much. We try, you go on trust in Mijas, and we work together to get the best to the people here, to British people living with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think I need to translate that last bit. That was in English. Muy bien. So moving on then, I think we can start with some of the questions perhaps for Charmaine.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I shall read the first question. Since Mrs May seems so keen and proud on votes for women, I'm pleased to see she's going to return my vote. Not mine, but somebody else's. Having lived out of the UK for more than 15 years, the Spanish stare at me agape when I tell them that I have no vote in any general election. This was promised in October 2016, and the reason given initially for this exclusion was that the electoral records didn't go back that far. So when can I be expected to be allowed to vote? Will it be in time for the next general election in 2020, and or in the event of another Brexit referendum?
Okay, so I suppose the first thing to start off with is you're absolutely right, Anne, and we've had, on the run-up to the Brexit referendum, on the run-up to the general election, one of the first questions that people have always asked is, when are we going to get the right to vote? Because we're actually disenfranchised, we're the people that are most affected by a Brexit referendum, and yet we had no option and no choice to help with making that decision. So the good news is that, and we knew before the Brexit referendum that the government had in its manifesto a commitment to reinstating votes for life, but it didn't happen before the last general election. It is still in the manifesto. The information that we have from London is that it will continue to be in their manifesto, and that there is an assumption that that will happen ahead of the next general election. What was released last week in the press was information about the consultation exercise that took place in 2016, I think it was, and we know that there's a private members bill, and it has its second reading in the House of Commons on the 23rd of February. So I think after the 23rd of February, that's when we'll kind of have a clearer idea of when that is likely to happen. So it is looking positive, and all of the signs from government are, look, you know, post-Brexit, it's going to be even more important that we, you know, that we're able to present ourselves as a democratic nation, and we want, I think the last count was 5 million British nationals that are living overseas without a vote. So it's incredible. Yeah.
That's a lot of people. That could have swayed the vote in the first place.
No comment.
Right, well, before we move on to the next, thank you very much for that, Charmaine. Obviously, can you keep us updated after the 23rd?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Before moving on to the next, I have to let the mayor go. Thank you so much for attending. Muchísimas gracias por haber venido, aunque sea muy breve. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, and we shall continue with the questions.
Right, this is another question which we've got from one of our viewers on Facebook. I'm in the Spanish health system in my own right, not through the S1, and my EHIC card is therefore issued by Spain. Will I be able to register as a temporary resident in the NHS if I go there for 2 or 3 months or more? I've never gone back for that length of time, but my daughter is having a baby in the summer and I shall probably be spending longer periods of time there.
Okay, I'll try and give an answer that kind of covers both S1 holders and non-S1 holders, yeah? So the first thing is to say that until exit day, you continue to be covered for any necessary healthcare under the existing system, yeah? So if you're a resident in Spain and you've got a Spanish EHIC, you go to the UK, you will continue to be treated exactly as you are now, yeah? And I suppose the only thing to mention is that the length of time, if you go to your GP, to the GP, it'd be fine. You don't need to register. Just go for your you would only be referred for any specialist care if it was deemed that it was important for you to have that before you would be able to get back to Spain. So ordinarily the assumption would be any specialist care, you would be coming back to Spain for that. Yeah. So I guess it depends on the length of time that the person, is going to be there. A plea, which is that we always ask people, even though you've got your EHIC, even though you are a British national, if you are travelling to the UK for any length of time, please take out travel insurance. And please ensure that you declare any pre-existing conditions. Interestingly, that's one of the main reasons that the other way round, when Brits come to Spain and we have to pick them up from the consulate, one of the main reasons why we have issues is not because people haven't taken out their travel insurance, it's because they've not declared a pre-existing condition. So that's the first thing. Second thing, S1 holder or not, if you move back to the UK, you can register with your GP. You can register with the GP. What you will be asked for will be evidence that you are now habitually resident in the UK, and that sometimes causes a problem for people because they might be asked to produce a utility bill or some sort of rental contract or something like that. What is helpful and might also be useful is if you are no longer going to be in Spain, that you deregister with the Spanish authorities and that you inform the Department of Work and Pensions in the UK so that they are aware in the system that you are no longer in Spain, because that will help as well. In terms of what comes after Brexit, the UK's position has been that it will continue to, it wants to come to an agreement over reciprocal healthcare arrangements, so that's around the S1 and around EHICs. But obviously that's going to be negotiated, that's something that's being negotiated at the moment. We know that the citizens' rights issues are now with the civil servants, and all the detail is being tied up, and they're trying to codify that so that it will be part of the final withdrawal bill. So my advice to people is that they keep, if they're interested in what's happening, that they keep up to date by checking gov.uk. There is a particular page which is UK nationals in the EU, yeah. And if you follow that page, you can ask to follow that. If you can ask to have updates on that page, if you follow that, you will be aware of everything as it is happening. And you can also go to Brits in Spain, which is our embassy Facebook page.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next question again, it's for Charmaine. Renewal of residences. Why are the police here now asking for all documents to be presented for just a renewal? It's very confusing because different towns ask for different documents. Some insist on sworn translations, others do not. Surely there must be a general set of rules that should be followed by all towns.
Yeah, this is a difficult one for us, partly because I'm commenting on something which is Spanish law rather than British arrangements. But it has come to our attention, certainly, particularly on the Costa del Sol, but in the Canaries as well, less so in other parts of Spain, but where people have said that they've tried to renew their residencia, or they've tried to register on the padrón, and they've been told, that the rules have changed. The rules have not changed, yeah? And what we are trying to do from the consulate, and I would quite like to know, I don't know whether people want to do it through Brexpats, but I would quite like to know of specific instances where people are being told by town halls or by police that they can't register. I'd like to know where those officers are, because what we're trying to do is go back centrally to Madrid, rather than dealing with every town hall. Go back centrally to Madrid and say, can we have chapter and verse, please, on what the regulations are, because I kind of share the concern. People are being told it's easier for you to register in this place than it is in another place, and actually the rules are standard, but people are interpreting them differently.
I did send you a couple, if you remember.
Yeah.
I know, because you did ask for that. And I think in Almeria they were saying that you needed to have a residencia, before you could go on the padron, which is not the case. I mean, they've got it totally the wrong way around, and it made it very difficult. It's a bit of a vicious circle.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would quite like us to get chapter and verse from central government, because I think that if we're pushing a message, which we are pushing, everybody should be registering on the padron, everybody should be registering with extranjería, everybody should be registering for their healthcare. Yeah, if we're pushing that message and people are coming back to us and saying, actually, I tried it, but I've been told blah blah blah, I've been given the runaround, it's really important that we're able to give them a kind of chapter and verse on this is what you need to go back and say. But it's also important that the Spanish authorities, like the local police, the police locally and the town halls locally are getting that message consistently from central government that they need to follow the regulations rather than make up whatever it feels okay to make up.
I think it's open to misinterpretation by the agents themselves a lot of the time. Okay. Shall we continue with you, Charmaine? Because I know you've got to... Okay.
The next question is, again on residencia. Do you know if I will have to apply again for my residencia as a non-EU citizen after Brexit?
That's a really good one. A short answer, no, I don't know. So that's one of the things that will be up for negotiation, but obviously we're quite a way away from having that kind of detail as yet. So we don't know whether there will be an insistence that everybody re-registers, or whether there will be a sort of, a period where we allow people to, whenever they get to the end of a certain length of time, that they need to re-register, but in a different way. So I really don't know. The honest answer is we don't know, and we won't know that for a while.
Okay.
I'm going to throw one in. Are we still on for this March the 29th, 2019? Or is it now becoming November 2020? For the exit day and the beginning of the implementation period, we are definitely still on, she said, for March 2019. What's still not clear and what's still open to negotiation is how long the implementation period will last. So the European Union have suggested, quite rightly, I think December 2020, because that's the end of the budgetary cycle that we're in. Yeah, so that's a kind of nice, clean finish. But the UK are sort of saying we think we might need a bit longer. So that date, that length of time is still up for negotiation. Okay, thank you. The next question for Charmaine. There is talk that our acquired rights might continue after Brexit. How many years of residency would one need to qualify for that? And will new arrivals during the transition period still be entitled to the same rights?
Again, this is a difficult one to answer, because what I can tell you is what the UK have set forward, which was, if you remember, it was 5 years. And the request had been, if we make this offer, we would like that to be reciprocated for British nationals that are living elsewhere in the European Union. It has not been tied down and it hasn't been agreed as yet, but that will be one of the things that's being talked through by the civil servants at the moment as they're going through and trying to codify. So we've had sufficient progress on the negotiations for us to move to phase 2. So if you remember, all of that would have been in the citizens' rights in phase 1. But of course, what sufficient progress meant was that we've agreed in general terms what we want. What now happens is that the civil servants sit down and they have to agree in detail what goes into the legislation. So that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you. You might have just seen we've been served some lovely strawberry thingies.
Non-alcoholic.
They are alcohol-free. But thank you very much for that. And I thank you to Samuel, who's provided us with all of this and is allowing us the use of his premises. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Yes, another question. If an expat a few years short of UK retirement age gains residency by virtue of sufficient income and private medical insurance, can they, after a year, leave private medical insurance and pay the convenio especial? If so, will the spouse be automatically covered? And leading on from that, if they cannot leave private insurance, can they stop the no co-payments after 1 year?
Okay, so the first thing to say, I'm not able to comment on your private medical agreement, so you would need to go through the small print of what it is that you've signed up to. Yeah. If you can terminate your contract and you've been here for a year, because as everyone knows, you've got to have been here for a year before you can pay into the convenio especial. If you can do that and you've been, and sorry, it's not that you've been here for a year, it's that you have been registered, yeah, for 12 months, yeah, on the padrón. Then you can sign the convenio especial. Important to point out that the convenio especial, as far as I'm aware, does not allow for dependents. So each person would have to pay in their own right.
Right.
Yeah. And then, of course, you can leave the convenio especial whenever you choose to.
It's quite expensive, isn't
It
it?
is.
Over 65.
It is expensive, and I think it's well worth reading the small print because there's lots of stuff that's excluded from the convenio. Yeah, from the convenio especial. So it's it's not. What is it here? About 50? Is it €50 a month? Is it more than
under
that?
65s, it's 157 over the age of over 65.
So I'm probably
157 a month, and it excludes prescriptions.
Right.
So for a couple, we're talking about over 300. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Particularly on their limited now pension. What would the pound be in?
But presumably, if you're on a pension, if you state pensionable age, you can do it through the S1.
As we stand at the minute,
So,
but this is the worry that they might not be able to, and what will they do? Because to get a private insurance aged over 70 or with a pre-existing condition, it's really expensive, if not virtually impossible.
You're quite right, and obviously, I am representing what the government would like, and what the government has said really clearly is that it will look to replace the S1 with a reciprocal healthcare agreement. So we shouldn't be in the situation of anybody that's in receipt of, that's of state pensionable age, not being in receipt of healthcare.
That would be really welcome, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, another one for Charmaine.
It's my show.
It's Charmaine Arbery's show. A member says, I was at the Elche meeting and was shocked to hear that the British consulate's time post-Brexit will undoubtedly be spent sorting out the British residents who have not legally complied here. They're being encouraged all the time to become legal citizens, but have chosen to remain under the radar, some for many years. So perhaps I'm being controversial, but I don't consider they deserve such help and concern. Has the embassy and consulates been given any directions yet for how they must act post-Brexit?
Okay, so I'll kind of rewind a little bit and maybe just say what the sorts of things are that we've been involved in since the referendum. So immediately after the referendum, the first things that we were doing was trying to get out, you'll know, Anne, that we tried to do things. I think we've done across Spain more than 60 events now that the consulates have taken part in, where we've tried, in the initial stages, we tried to get information from people, from British nationals, about their concerns that we could then feed back to the Department for Exiting the European Union. And I think we've been, even though it may not feel like it, I'd kind of like to give everyone a pat on the back, because I think the information that we got from those early sessions has really driven the agenda around citizens' rights. And I think, you'll remember that in the very early days, a lot of the press coverage in the UK was really around what's going to happen to EU nationals in the UK. And there was very little concern about what was happening to the British nationals that were living in the European Union. So I think that organisations like Brexpats and other organisations that people have that have organised themselves to, to give evidence to select committees and that have written into to government. I think you've done an amazing job, and and we've been part of that. So that's the first thing to say what we've been doing. The second thing that's probably worth mentioning is that we've tried to share information as that's become available. We continue to do what we always did as consulates, which is to try and get out to people and say, these are the top issues that you really need to be aware of as a British national living in Spain. Even though Brexit has kind of brought that into sharp focus, they're the same set of issues as they always were, which are make sure that you're registered on the Padrón. By registering on the Padrón, your local authority is ensuring that it gets the right local government settlement that pays for your streets to be cleaned, your bins to be emptied, social services, social care. All of those things are calculated on the basis of the number of people that are resident in a municipio. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, if you're registered on the Padrón, it is also going to be your access to social care if you need it at some point. The third message that we give to people is it's not just about registering on a Padrón, it's also about registering with Extranjería. What happens after Brexit, whatever happens, one of the things that we can all be absolutely clear about is those people, the date that will be used, or the figures that will be used for assessing who was resident here is who was registered with Extranjería. People tend to assume that just because they've registered at one point on the Padrón, that's it, I don't need to do it again. You need to make sure that your registration is up to date. If you're not sure, go in and find out. Just go and ask, And the third thing is making sure that your healthcare arrangements are in place. Obviously, it's different for different people depending on when you came. I can't remember when the cut-off date was, whenever it changed and you had to show that you had... I can't remember, maybe that was the date, but I know that for those people it's slightly different, but for those of us that came before then, we didn't have to show anything. We still need to make sure that we're registered properly for healthcare. So what will we be doing post-Brexit? Post-Brexit, the consulates will continue to provide the services that they have always provided to British nationals who are vulnerable. And anybody who's ever been to any consular outreach programmes will know that we do not provide lifestyle type advice. So, if you need to know which school your kids need to go to, sorry, that's not the consulate. We're on limited resources, the same as everyone else, and what we prioritise are those people who are vulnerable. So my message, rather than sort of saying these people are deserving and those people are not deserving, my message would be make sure that you're properly registered, make sure that you're doing it now before March 2019, make sure you know what your healthcare arrangements are, and people that need the consulate before Brexit, after the leaving date, after the implementation period, if you are vulnerable, you will continue to have access to our services.
You have a big heart. Thank you. Let's move on now. We'll give Charmaine a bit of a breather. Shall we move on to Tim and Craig?
Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm asking both of you here. Spanish widows' pensions, a lady has written. I currently receive this based on the years I paid in here and mostly paid in the UK. Will this be affected?
Sorry, you need the mic.
It's quite a specific question that I must admit I haven't had before. But our understanding is that no, in principle it should not be affected because the right to receive a widow's pension is determined upon the event, which is the death of a spouse. And if both the deceived person and the spouse meet certain requirements, it gives them the entitlement, it gives the surviving spouse the entitlement to receive a widow's pension. And these requirements depend, for example, on the number of years that Social Security has been paid, and then you can go to the National Social Security Institute and claim for the widow's pension at any stage post the bereavement of the spouse. When you go and try to apply for this widow's pension, they can go back as far as 3 months. So if you wait a long time, you will not be paid up for the time lost. But in principle, once you met the requirements, there should be no reason why, after Brexit, the widow's pension doesn't continue.
Okay,
Thank you.
Shall I carry on and ask Tim then? Somebody asks, can somebody please explain how the double or triple lock on pensions might apply?
Well, the triple, what is a triple lock? The triple lock was introduced I believe, in 2010 to make sure that whenever inflation is low, that you have a minimum increase factor of the pension. So what does a triple lock mean is that pensions increase on an annual basis with the higher of inflation, the average earnings index, and 2.5%. Okay, so why has a triple lock been quite on the agenda? Is because a number of countries have, of the Commonwealth as such, have where people retire to, those retirees will not be entitled to have that triple lock system applied to their pensions. So once Spain will be out of, once Britain will be out of the EU, will Spanish residents be out of this triple lock system? Well, in principle, it has been agreed, to my understanding, that they won't, and that the triple lock system will continue. Now, to come to the second question, what's a double lock? Well, basically, the triple lock system is very expensive. Because bear in mind, people live longer, people now easily live into their 80s and 90s, so with this minimum increase factor, obviously this is a big cost to the government. So a number of the past pensions ministers in the UK, such as Ross Altman and Steve Webb, they've actually considered alternatives for the very expensive triple lock system. For example, the double lock system, which would be a system where they take out the 2.5% increase factor, and where it would just be depending on the higher of the average earnings index or inflation. And there was another alternative where it would be just referred to the average earnings index. So in principle, the triple lock system, as long as it exists in the UK, it should apply to Spanish residents as well,
Okay.
to my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Judy?
the last one for you is I've been told that I only need to pay tax in one country. How true is this? I am living in Spain and I receive my UK pension, so pay my tax there.
Well, you can only be tax resident really in one country. And a double taxation agreement between the UK and Spain would determine if you're a resident here, then you pay tax in Spain on your worldwide income. Now, the only exception are certain public service pensions or civil service pensions, such as teachers' pensions, a lot of the teachers' pensions, military pensions, etc. So these are, in principle, still taxed at source in the UK, but once you become a Spanish resident here in Spain, any other pensions, state pension, private pensions, will always be subject to income tax here in Spain on a yearly basis. So what could happen is that if you have a civil service pension which is still taxed in the UK at source, that it could push you up in a higher tax bracket here. So it is taken into account, but it is not taxed here in Spain. It's deductible. So in principle, no, you're only tax resident here, but depending on the type of pension income that you receive, it might be, if it's such a civil service pension, for example, that it is still taxed at source. Other types of income could be, for example, rental income in the UK, which is also still taxed in the UK. But these are exemptions. In principle, your income is taxed here in Spain.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should we move on to Vicky now?
Yes, should I?
Vicky, okay, let's grab the mic. Inheritance question. How will my daughter who lives in England be affected? Will she have to pay a higher tax because she's non-resident in the event of her inheriting my property in Spain? And the same question would apply if, having inherited the property, she then sells it.
It depends on whereabouts in Spain the property is. I don't suppose we know, Anne, where this property is. So if we take Andalusia as an example, currently there's no inheritance tax payable in Andalusia if you inherit a property or assets which are under €1 million. And this was a change that came in from the 1st of January this year. And that is if you're a direct descendant inheriting or
Even
a
though
spouse.
they're resident in the UK?
I'm talking about at the moment, yes, even if they're residents in the UK. Previous to 2015, non-Spanish residents did have to pay a higher amount of inheritance tax because the state rules applied, whereby there was only allowance in those circumstances of €16,000. But that was taken to the European Court of Justice in 2014 and found to be discriminatory between Spanish residents and EU nationals. So the tax regime of where your property is or where the deceased lived is what applies even if you're if the beneficiary is resident in the UK. What could possibly happen after Brexit is that when we cease to be EU nationals, then the Spanish government could then go back to applying the state rules and the allowance of only €16,000. So unless there is some sort of bilateral agreement that is agreed between Spain and the UK in the future, then it's potentially people inheriting after Brexit could land themselves with a higher inheritance tax bill. Regards to this, would the same question apply if, having inherited the property, she then sells it? Prior to selling the property, she would have to go through the inheritance process, so she would still have to pay the inheritance tax prior to selling the property on in the future.
Let me just lead on from that, perhaps for Charmaine. Do you think it's going to come down to bilateral agreements with the EU member states and the UK?
You have to.
Sorry.
You have to hope. It might be easier.
That's right.
I'm only going to say you have to hope not.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, the bilateral taxation agreements work absolutely fine, but to have to make, we're talking about what, 27 member states? It's a lot of bilateral agreements on everything, isn't it?
Yes.
So let's all have our fingers crossed that we see sense and that
these
we all
agreed in
and that we
principles
agree
become rubber stamps.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Another question for Vicky, if she can get the microphone. Okay. I'll pass. Yeah. As a permanent resident here in Spain, can I still write my will as per the UK law, or will I have to follow the Spanish law after Brexit?
Thanks, Judy. Regards to Brexit and effect on whether or not your national law can apply in your will, this was following 2012 European regulation, which came into force in 2015, whereby you can now choose which law applies to your succession. You can choose that your national law applies to your succession. A lot of people redrafted their wills in Spain to include this clause that they wish their national law to apply. The UK never signed up to this directive anyway, and there's no requirement that the law you choose is an EU law. You can be a Chinese national living in Spain and ask that your Chinese law applies to your succession. So this shouldn't be affected by Brexit.
Could I just clarify something there, though? If you have assets here in Spain, do you still need a Spanish will to dispose of those assets, or say that from the Spanish will you want your effects in Spain to be dealt with under English law?
You don't need a Spanish will. You can use your English will, but it's very costly. You have to translate your English will, you have to legalise your English will. The notary in Spain will only deal with your assets in Spain once they're satisfied all the probate has gone through in the UK. So it's much more costly and time-consuming to
Right.
rely on a foreign will in Spain.
Charmaine has a comment to make.
Sorry.
Minding the drink.
It's not a comment, it's a question. Last week I was doing an event, and my understanding was that you can have a will written in Spain, but under English law. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah. But then somebody said to me, and I thought that was just for disposing of your Spanish assets, but then somebody else commented to me that then made null and void any previous will that you might have had in the UK dealing with your English assets.
Well, what we tell people when they are having a will drafted in the UK, to make sure that they just deal with the will in the UK just deals with the English assets.
Yeah.
The will in Spain will just deal with the Spanish assets. So there isn't one or the other cancelling each
Right.
other out in
So-
those circumstances.
So if I've made a will in the UK like last year or before I came to Spain or whatever, and it only dealt with my English assets, by virtue of writing a will in Spain that only deals with my Spanish assets, it doesn't nullify the English
no,
will.
they just run in
Okay.
parallel,
Okay,
and the Spanish will
perfect.
deals with your Spanish assets, and the English will deals with your
Thank you, I've
English
got another
assets.
answer clear in my head.
No problem.
Now, Charmaine unfortunately also has to leave. We were late starting this. So I've got some general questions, and Charmaine, I think, wants to pick up on the one about driving licences. So I'll just read you the question. We'll come back to you after then, Vicky, with
No problem.
your
Do
questions.
you want the microphone back? Are you?
Yeah, okay. The question is, when am I required by law to change my UK driving licence for a Spanish one? I have lived here for 4 years. I drive a Spanish-plated car, but my driving licence is British. Now, there's lots of confusion about driving licences of late. I do know.
Okay, so other people can kind of comment if they think I've got it wrong, but I think I've understood the system now, which is that as of 2013, I think it was, when there was something that kind of accepted that all the European licences were valid everywhere, we don't really have a problem.
Standardised.
Yeah, we don't really have a problem anymore. So the things that in my head we need to flag is anybody that's still driving on a paper licence, that is an issue. Yeah,
That is an issue.
that is an issue because that's dated to whenever you're not allowed to drive anymore, and so that's beyond the 15 years or the 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you've got a paper licence, then you do need to change it. Yeah, and I think technically, if your license, your UK licence expires, so if you're on your little pretty pink one with your
Yeah, with the
photo,
photo.
and it expires and you are resident here, you should be replacing that with a Spanish one.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's it. Dead simple, I think.
I think it's within 2 years, if you have the paper one, within 2 years of being resident in
Spain, you should change that.
Change it.
What happens after Brexit? I'm not sure. It'll depend on the negotiations and what comes out.
I think if you've got a
what comes
Spanish
out of the deal.
licence already in your back pocket.
Well, that's a good
then
point. Which is, if you've got a Spanish license, maybe that's
maybe they don't,
a push for you
hopefully they don't take it away
to
from
have
you
a Spanish
after
license. Yeah.
Brexit.
Do you want to pick up on any of the other generals?
There was a specific question about pets,
There was.
and I know that people get quite
Yeah.
anxious about their pets, and it's just to say that up until exit day, we continue to be members of the pet transport scheme. I think that's what it's called, and it is one that has been flagged up, and we are very aware that it needs to be negotiated as part of the wider negotiation process. The British government, the British government are saying that obviously they do want to make sure that we come to some agreement on that, because there are a lot of animals and it's not just pets that we're talking about. There's free flow of goods as well that we need to be concerned about. So
Besides the European Union countries, for pets coming into the UK, there's also listed countries whereby it's allowed for pets to travel into the UK as long as they have a certificate from a vet regarding having a
there are
rabies
places where you don't have to have
Canada,
the quarantine if
America, they can
yeah.
come into They can come into Spain, but they can also
Go into the
go
UK.
into the
Concern is
UK.
that Britain is going to reintroduce quarantine.
I don't, yeah.
I would imagine as long as you could
knows?
certify that
they've had their jabs,
The
which is
jabs.
basically what I mean. If we've got a system that works, and I'm sort of hypothesising now, but if we've got a system that's worked up until the 29th of March, and we've been very happy with a pet passport scheme and certification that they've had the rabies jabs and all of the other things that they need to have, why would you throw all of that out of the window and say
If you're
we don't-
complying
yeah.
with those rules,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't have the label EU,
Yeah.
then I imagine that there would be cooperation between the countries.
And of course, it works as much the other way around. So we're probably concerned from a Spain perspective about getting our pets into the UK, but it works the same the other way around, and that will probably be a big driver of sorting
I'm
it.
going to leave it on a controversial note because I know you have to go. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, is what you're saying. So what's happened to the EU? Why are we leaving? Because in the eyes of
$1 million question.
many millions, it wasn't broken. And I leave you on that note. You don't have to answer. You're not obliged to reply. But I know that will be a comment. Thank you so much, Charmaine.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We continue on with Vicky's third
Okay.
question, I think, which is, if I bring my family here to live after Brexit, will my children still be entitled to state education, or will I have to pay for private schooling? I think that's quite an easy one to answer. Vicky,
Oh yeah,
isn't it?
there's a very quick answer to that one. That children living in Spain, either legally or illegally, have the right to free education. And that's enshrined in the European Conventions on Human Rights and also national law in Spain. It's not linked to residency. It's while those children under the age of 16 are in Spain, they have the right to free education.
Okay, sorry. No, carry on.
Right, one last
Oh, we need the microphone back. Sorry.
One last question for Vicky. Yeah, if I send my British-born son to a UK university in 2019, will his ultimate qualification still be recognised here in Spain when he returns to live?
That's an interesting question because within the EU we have the mutual recognition of professional qualifications, so covering doctors, accountants, lawyers, for example. And then you have academic qualifications, which are separate from professional qualifications. And there's no automatic recognition between EU countries when it comes to academic qualifications. So this is governed by the Council of Europe, which has nothing to do with the EU. There's 47 countries signed up to the Council of Europe. And basically, as long as your qualification that you've received from a foreign university is of similar duration and content to the qualification in your host country, then that qualification cannot be refused. So again, this won't be affected by Brexit because it's outside of the sphere of the European Union.
Thank you. I think now we move on to Miriam. First question for Miriam is, how much do non-EU residents pay in capital gains tax when selling their property? They obviously know it's a current 3% taxation upon selling a property. Will it still apply to British owners after Brexit?
It's exactly the same. Exactly the same, 3%. They don't have any problems on
So
that
it's no
tax.
different for non-EU
Not different,
or EU,
non-EU
it's
or
still
from,
3%.
It's exactly
Okay.
the same, 3%.
Fine. The second question is, what laws apply in Spain for short-term rentals, please? I know the association is always saying we must act legally here, and I know there's a relatively new law, but it doesn't seem to have come into effect yet. Presuming this is an EU directive, as a Leave voter, it annoys me that Spain and other EU countries seem able to suit themselves whilst we in the UK are forced to comply with the EU laws.
No, no.
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 That's a very simple answer.
No, we have actually in Spain, we have a short-term letting, the owners that they want to rent their apartments. We have an effective law since 2012, but only start 2 years ago, really, running into Spain, into Andalusia, we could say, because every other places, they have another type of rules. In Spain. And every apartment is short-term letting has to be registered in La Delegación de Turismo in Málaga. It's not very expensive, really, because it's only about 80 euros per normal apartment, to bed, to bath. But they have to be registered if they are going to publish that apartment in any online portal, anyone, because there is a fine that is nearly could be arrive until 150,000 euros. Because they are not registered. The only regulation that you have to have is not very complicated. It's only air conditioning on every bedroom and on the lounge. Has to have curtains that enough shade in the apartment. You have to have a first aid box into the apartment, and you have to have only a list of emergency telephone numbers, and also you have to have a list of what you have beside on if there is a resort or what else. But that is a law that is effective, and you have inspectors running all over our coast, really.
Thank you. Okay.
Welcome.
Pastor Judy, we've got now some general questions. Whoever wants to pick up on them, it's up to you.
As a British business owner here and employing British staff, how will Brexit affect me?
Who wants to take that one?
That is fantastic.
I think that depends on the negotiations again, as whether or not British people coming in after Brexit will be able to get, whether work permits would be required.
Employing British staff, I think that's what they're worried about. Is it going to be difficult? Are they going to have to get visas for their British staff that they want to employ, etc.? I think that was more the concern.
Well, I think if they're here already, then that it depends on the withdrawal agreement being implemented, but that would then allow them to work as well as reside.
But again,
if we fall off a cliff edge, then that's something that the national
you need the state healthcare. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right then. Thank you. Okay. And the next question is it correct that our residencia should read con carácter permanente, or is it automatically conferred after 5 years? No, it's not necessarily a Brexit question, I understand, but it is something that a lot of people are concerned about. I presume that's going to be you again, Vicky, is it? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, it is automatic after 5 years that you're considered a permanent resident in Spain. But in order to evidence that, to demonstrate that, then it's always a good idea to go and get it, and then you'll have it in black and white. So I would belt and braces approach, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely.
May I just come in on this one then, Vicky, because I've just gone and done this process, and I have seen the people's residencias with this little phrase con carácter permanente. Mine has got residente comunitario permanente. Now that troubles me.
I think they've just decided to change the wording along the
Really,
the
I
line somewhere.
thought it might have been when we're slung out of it, we're no longer
It's
part
got
of the community.
permanente.
Yes,
If it's got permanente, then you'll be
fine.
fine.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to ask the next question then?
Okay, right. Will I be able to sign a letter of invitation in order that a non-EU person can obtain a Schengen visa after Brexit?
Looking at me.
Tim?
I
No idea.
I don't think it matters. I think if you're legally resident in Spain, whether you're from the EU or not, then you can sign a letter of invitation. But I'd have to double check the Department of Immigration for that. But that's my understanding.
Okay, and this next one is really a general concern. I know Guy Verhofstadt of the EU has been trying for it, but the question is, as a resident of 20 years, why can I not get dual nationality with Spain? I understand that the Spanish are happy to negotiate this, but the UK is not. Is this true, and if so, why? Because they don't even insist that the UK passport is handed back to them. A shame, we should have asked Charmaine this one, but
I
I
think
should
it's
like
the
to
other.
comment on that, Vicky.
I think it's the other way around. I think it's the other way around. The UK are happy to accept dual nationality, whereby the Spanish government
So we need to badger the
isn't.
Spanish.
So
is
we
that
need
what
to
we're saying?
badger the Spanish, because there's only a limited
We'll
number
get
of
on the
countries where they recognise it, such as former colonies in Latin American countries or the Sephardi.
Obviously, if you're
Jews.
married to a Spaniard or a son or daughter of one Spanish parent, then you can apply for dual nationality. If you've lived here for more than 10 years, you can take the dual nationality test.
I understand as well, the Spanish people living in the UK after 5 years can apply for British nationality, and they don't have to renounce their Spanish nationality.
Okay, well,
So it
this
works
needs
one
to be
way,
reciprocal, doesn't it?
but not the other. So
Right, well, that's something we shall be taking up with our Spanish politicians. And seeing
absolutely.
seeing if we can get some rights on that. I don't think we've got any more questions, actually. Does anybody else have any more comments to make? Any more useful little snippets of information? Are we all happy with Brexit the way it's going? No. Okay.
In a word.
Craig's just Tim, you're Belgian though, so I mean, you know, you're happy.
Well,
You're
I mean,
safe.
I'm proud of our
You're safe.
Guy Verhofstadt, who's defending the rights.
Nice man. Nice man.
So I'm watching him almost on a daily basis. It's very interesting what he's doing in the
Yeah.
European Parliament. Yeah, we don't seem to get any straightforward answers. From
No,
them,
we
so
don't.
no.
We don't. How about you, Vicky? What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm keeping my eye on the case that was referred from Amsterdam
Oh yes, and you're
to
on the radio tomorrow
the
talking
European
about that. Yeah.
Court of Justice to see what happens there, because they're asking for a preliminary ruling on the interpretation of EU law, whether or not EU citizenship can be automatically revoked. So it's going to be interesting to see what the ECJ come up with,
Decide,
and it's
yeah.
something that we need to keep our eyes on, because that will have a huge bearing on all of us.
Okay.
Potentially.
And as our only Spanish national sitting on this panel at the moment, how do you feel Brexit is going, Miriam?
Well, I feel very sad, really, because if you know, we had British citizens since ages in Spain. The first pension made in Malaga, in Calle Larios, was owned and made by a British citizen. So it's a pity that having so many years of good relation, because of somebody decide to make a Brexit, then we have to, you know, be totally like now you need a passport and a visa to come to a place that you had nearly be with us.
You know,
for
I was
many
invited
years.
just before Christmas by a group of Spanish business people here.
Well, I
and
hope not, but I mean,
I was invited just before Christmas by a group of Spanish business people here to talk about Brexit. I thought it was odd. Why do they want to know about Brexit? I never realised that there was going to be such an impact on Spain as a result of Brexit. I'm perhaps thinking selfishly on behalf of being the British side. And I was talking to them, and I didn't realise, I think they said 80% of their fruit and veg is exported to the UK. That's going to be affected.
well, it's going to be affected,
Plus,
really.
obviously, particularly, as Juan Carlos Maldonado mentioned, the economy of tourism here.
Of course.
And it's something they really do not want to lose. It's
well,
the main economy.
We had it always. Why we should lose it now? You know, we are very happy.
I mean,
well-
I feel deeply saddened that Spain, particularly, is going to suffer as a result of a decision that the UK has made.
Well,
Personally. You don't.
Sun will keep on shining here.
The sun will keep on
What will
shining.
be the alternative?
And the rain will still keep raining in the UK. Do we, just to wind up, do we actually think there might be a second referendum, which is the big talk at the minute? No?
no.
Anybody want to pick up on that? No. No. Okay, well, our next meetings will include, I hope, Tráfico, and we can talk a little bit more about driving licences and clarification on that. Also, we will be having a member doctor from the State Healthcare here to talk about health issues. I'd like to thank you all very much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope we've resolved some of your concerns. So until the next time, thank you very much.